kill, savaging their own.
Why on earth would any mother raise a child and then kill it and burn it?
Making a game of murder. Shockingly brutal acts.
I robbed him and I killed him. It's cold as ice.
What drives them to these extremes? And who is most evil? A scale exists to measure the darkest corners of human behavior, acts of evil. It weighs the criminal mind and the crime, from impulsive murderers to serial killers. Science now has a tool to determine who are the most evil. "93% of murders are committed by men. What motivates the few women driven to kill? Mary Beth Tinning's 9 children mysteriously die, one by one. Kathy Wood and Gwen Graham, nurses' aides in Michigan, play a vicious game that takes the lives of 5 patients. Teresa Knorr ruthlessly tortures her 6 children and kills 2 daughters. Mothers and caregivers are expected to nurture, yet they are capable of appalling evil acts.
Tammy Lynn Tinning was the 9th child to die in the Tinning family.
But not all evil acts are equal. How these women kill and why is different. What compels these atrocities? To determine their degrees of evil, one must compare their crimes. Now there is a scale with 22 levels that measures the different degrees of evil. It weighs a killer's motive, method, and malice. The more calculated and brutal the crime, the higher the criminal is placed on the scale.
My scale helps me navigate the rather turbid waters of violent crime.
Creator of this scale, Dr. Michael Stone, forensic psychiatrist, Columbia University. Dr. Stone asks probing questions.
What are the personality characteristics? What are the background histories? Drug abuse, parental neglect, parental brutality? Is it possible to be born evil?
Most women who kill end up on the lower levels of Dr. Stone's scale of evil because they are one-time impulsive killers. Women like Jean Harris, the headmistress at a private girls' school. Harris shot and killed her lover when she discovered he was having an affair. Dr. Stone places Harris at the low end of his scale, level 2, crimes of passion. As he continues to examine the cases of women who kill, Dr. Stone notices another pattern.
You find that the overwhelming majority have killed somebody in their intimate circle. They might kill a spouse or sexual partner. They might kill a parent, or they might kill a child.
As was the case with Mary Beth Tinning. Schenectady, New York, 1971. Mary Beth Tinning and her husband Joe have 2 healthy children, Barbara 4 and Joseph 1. Mary Beth is pregnant with her 3rd child. Shortly before the baby is born, Mary Beth's father dies. 3 months later, her newborn baby dies of meningitis. Before the funeral, she begins what will become a ritual. She carefully washes the baby's clothes and packs them away, along with the baby's toys and furniture. At the funeral, she is overwhelmed by not only grief, but sympathy. friends and neighbors flock to her side and attend to her every need. 2 weeks later, Mary Beth brings her son Joseph to the emergency room. He is pronounced dead, cause unknown. Just 1 month later, Mary Beth brings her one surviving child, Barbara, to the hospital. They urge her to leave the child there, but she takes her home. Barbara dies the following day, her third child to die in the span of 2 months. Once again, before the funeral, she performs her ritual.
To understand Mary Beth Tinning's response to the attention she received when her children died, one must look to her childhood.
As a child, Mary Beth Rowe acts out at school and has few friends. At home, she feels like the daughter her parents never wanted. Her father is cold and inattentive. He locks her in a closet when she cries. It is his attention that will always remain just outside her grasp. As a teenager, she is viewed as an outsider. Her one school activity? President of the Future Homemakers of America. Then Mary Beth's father falls ill. Even on his deathbed, he shows little connection to his only daughter.
Mary Beth Tinning's father died without ever showing his daughter the affection she craved. The subsequent attention she got from her baby's death may have been a psychological trigger.
1972. Mary Beth's 3 children have died. 1973, a 4th baby, Timothy, dies. Over the next few years, 3 more of Mary Beth's children die. At the hospital, 3 of the deaths are attributed to SIDS, and 4 deaths are listed as cause unknown. She repeats the same ritual. Friends and neighbors try to console the woman who has suffered so many tragic losses. They whisper of a rare genetic disorder that might be claiming the lives of her children.
The funeral of any child is a very difficult thing for a funeral director, and this family just seemed to have so much bad luck that, you know, our hearts here at the Dailies went out to them.
But in 1981, the whispers of a genetic disorder suddenly grow quiet. A boy she is adopting dies. Now, suspicion rather than sympathy follows Mary Beth Tinning. December 1985, another baby, Tammy Lynn, dies. And Mary Beth Tinning is arrested.
Tammy Lynn Tinning was the 9th child to die in the Tinning family in the past 14 years.
When police question her, she tearfully breaks down, telling investigators she never felt she was anything in life. She confesses to smothering 3 of her children, but denies harming the others.
Why would Mary Beth Tinning harm her own children? She showed a rare pattern of behavior the doctors call Munchausen by proxy. When caretakers repeatedly induce sickness in others because they enjoy the attention, For Tinning, it may have been a tragic attempt to get the validation she always craved.
Mary Beth Tinning was found guilty of killing her daughter and sentenced to 20 years to life. She will be eligible for parole in March of 2007. Like other women who kill, Mary Beth Tinning murdered those closest to her, her children. She seemed motivated by the attention she received when they died. These are factors Dr. Stone takes into account when placing Tinning on his scale of evil.
Because she killed at least some of her children, seemingly for the attention, I would place her at level 7 on my scale. Highly egocentric murderers who kill loved ones for narcissistic reasons.
There's not 1 minute that goes by that I don't think about these boys.
But not all mothers who kill belong at the same level on Dr. Stone's scale of evil. When all of Mary Beth Tinning's children mysteriously died, the community at first sympathized with her loss. But when she admitted to killing some of her children, sympathy turned to shock.
I think everyone is aware of who these two are.
To some, the acts of another mother, Susan Smith, provoke an even stronger reaction. When her crimes were exposed, the community was not only shocked,
Our lives have been torn apart by this tragic event.
they were outraged.
Susan Smith exploited the public sympathy for a grieving mother, and this led to outrage. This type of response is reserved for acts that the public considers especially evil.
1994, South Carolina. Susan Smith, the mother of 2 young boys, has recently separated from her husband. Soon after, a mother's worst fear is realized.
I would like to say to whoever has my children that they please bring them home.
Smith's children are missing.
Thank you.
She claims an African-American man abducted her 2 young sons, and she pleads to the nation for their safe return. As the police investigation unfolds, attention shifts to the grieving mother. Police grow suspicious of her story and subject her to multiple polygraph tests.
New developments in the case are being checked out as we speak. They are turning out not to be as promising as first anticipated.
9 days after her children's disappearance, Susan Smith confesses to killing her 2 sons. She drove her car to a lake and fastened her sleeping children into their seats. She released the emergency brake and watched as the car plunged into the water. Smith had been having an affair with a prominent executive where she worked. Days before the drowning of her children, he ended the affair with a letter.
You will, without a doubt, make some lucky man a great wife, but unfortunately, it won't be me. There are some things about you that aren't suited for me, and yes, I am speaking about your children.
Like Mary Beth Tinning, Susan Smith killed her children. However, Dr. Stone believes she is more evil.
Susan Smith was driven by selfish motives. She killed her children to continue an affair and then attempted to cover her deeds with an insidious lie.
I want to say to my babies that your mama loves you so much.
While Mary Beth Tinning belongs to level 7 of my scale, I place Susan Smith above her at level 10, egocentric killers of persons in the way.
The stories of Susan Smith and Mary Beth Tinning are memorable in part because there are so few women killers. Why are women less violent than men? Some researchers believe the answer lies in the structure of our brains. Dr. Reuben Gurr is a neurologist at the University of Pennsylvania.
Differences between men and women were interesting to me for as long as I can remember. Growing up, you wonder about the other sex. Do they feel the same way? Do they think the same way?
To understand the underlying differences between men and women, Dr. Gurr starts by studying their behavior.
If someone asked me, where do you see the biggest difference, I would point to physical aggression. That's the one behavior that makes us look very different. Just open this morning's paper or look at this morning news on the TV. If we're talking about physical aggression, chances are that it was done by men.
Statistics show that 93% of murders are committed by men. To identify why men and women have different levels of aggression, Dr. Gurr scanned the brains of 57 women and 59 men with an MRI and focused on 2 regions of the brain.
The 2 important regions with regard to emotion regulation are the amygdala and the orbital frontal area.
These regions are responsible for regulating emotion.
The amygdala is the part of the brain that is very sensitive to threat. It basically takes all the information that comes into your brain and makes one decision. Is that threatening or is that not threatening?
The orbital frontal region reads that signal and decides how to respond. By comparing these 2 regions, Dr. Gurr believes he can see what makes men more violent than women. He found that the brains of men and women were nearly identical, except for one startling difference: the orbital frontal region.
That part is relatively smaller in men than in women. So if you just take the volume of the orbital frontal and you measure it in a sample of men and a sample of women, we look like we come from 2 different species. Men have less capacity to inhibit an impulse to attack or to perform a physical act of aggression.
Because women have larger orbital frontal regions, Dr. Gurr believes they are more capable of controlling aggression than men.
So when the amygdala sends a command, attack, the man will have less orbital frontal tissue available to modulate that specific urge, and it will therefore be less likely to inhibit that tendency and may end up attacking another person.
However, not all women are able to inhibit violent impulses. Most women who kill, like Mary Beth Tenning and Susan Smith, murder those closest to them. This is not the case with Kathy Wood and Gwen Graham.
Kathy said, well, what's the worst thing you could think of? I hesitated and thought, well, murder would be the worst thing that I could think that a person could do. Then she paused and said, try 6 times.
Wood and Graham made a game of murder.
The fact that Wood and Graham viewed murder as a game makes their horrific crimes even more appalling.
1984, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Kathy Wood is depressed. The young wife and mother rarely leaves the house. She reads crime stories and thrillers, and she tells her husband that she is curious about what it would feel like to stab someone. She refuses to do housework and leaves her home in a squalid state. The marriage begins to suffer. But then a turning point. Wood gets a job as a nurse's aide at a local nursing home. She becomes more sociable. She starts spending time with her coworkers after hours. Kathy stays out all night partying, sparking a fight with her husband.
Kathy Wood's job at Alpine Manor represents a turning point. It lifts her confidence and encourages her to do things she had never done before.
1986. She demands a divorce and begins a series of lesbian relationships. Kathy is taken with a new co-worker named Gwen Graham. The relationship progresses, and Gwen moves in with Kathy. They begin working the same late hours and develop a deep bond. They play practical jokes on patients and co-workers. The romance intensifies physically, and they experiment in bondage. They assemble puzzles and play word games with the loser assuming the submissive role in their sexual fantasies. The relationship escalates and takes a diabolical turn. Gwen claims that while playing word games, they develop a twisted scheme to kill Alpine Manor patients. Kathy Wood and Gwen Graham are co-workers who became lovers. As the intensity of their relationship grows, their prankish behavior turns deadly. They develop a scheme to kill the elderly patients in their care. What are the factors that bring Kathy Wood and Gwen Graham to this sadistic plot? To answer this question, Dr. Stone must look at each of their pasts. 1962. Kathy Wood is born into an unhappy home. As a child, she claims her mother is harsh and unloving. She is sexually active at an early age. At 12, she fondles a young neighborhood boy. At 13, Kathy claims to have a sexual relationship with a girl who pretends to be a boy. The unhappy teenager plots her escape. Kathy Wood gets pregnant and moves in with her new boyfriend. Soon after, they marry. She later reveals that she planned her pregnancy so she could leave her parents' house.
From an early age, Kathy Wood displayed an ability and willingness to manipulate those close to her. And this would eventually include Gwen Graham.
1963. Gwen Graham is born in Santa Monica, California. As a teenager, she claims her father rapes her. She burns herself with cigarettes and cuts her arms with razors to deal with the trauma of her abuse. Gwen is involved in a series of lesbian relationships. In 1986, she follows a girlfriend to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and gets a job as a nurse's aide at Alpine Manor. There she meets Kathy Wood.
Perhaps their troubled childhoods drew them to one another. They became obsessively focused on one another, and that focus turned deadly.
1987, Alpine Manor. Wood and Graham begin searching for victims. The goal of their plot? To spell the word murder with their victim's initials. They select their first patient, a woman named Marguerite Chambers. Kathy claims she keeps watch as Gwen enters the patient's room and suffocates her with a washcloth.
She had a washcloth on Marguerite's nose and wouldn't burn her mouth, and she was suffocating her. And Marguerite was making noises and
Kathy believes there is a purpose to the murder game that transcends excitement and fun. She thinks the murders will unite the couple further, and that the knowledge of each other's evil deeds will prevent the other from ever leaving the relationship. Graham and Wood go on to murder 4 more Alpine Manor patients. They boast to their friends of their murderous game, but no one believes their tales. 1987, the relationship crumbles. Gwen leaves Kathy for another woman, shattering their murderous bond. Devastated, Kathy confesses to her ex-husband. 14 months later, Ken Wood goes to the police.
What's sad about everything is nobody ever asked, well, why did you do it?
Unlike Mary Beth Tenning and Susan Smith, who killed their children, Wood and Graham murdered their patients and took souvenirs from their victims as part of a vicious game.
Most doctors and nurses who kill their patients in supposed acts of mercy belong at level 14 of my scale. However, the motive behind the plot elevates Wood and Graham beyond that level. Not only do they murder to solidify their bond, but they murder for the joy of it. Because of this, I place them at level 16, multiple vicious acts.
Kathy Wood turns state's witness and claims that Gwen Graham is the mastermind of the murder game.
Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
Graham is found guilty of 5 counts of murder. She is sentenced to 5 life terms. Kathy Wood is sentenced to 20 to 40 years. The crimes of Graham and Wood pale in comparison to the brutality of Eileen Wuornos. Florida, 1989. The decomposed body of a man is discovered along a dirt road. He has been ruthlessly executed, shot 4 times in the chest, and is the first victim of a predatory killer named Eileen Wuornos. Wuornos is the first female serial killer profiled by the FBI. Like other serial killers, she is reckless, volatile, and drinks heavily. However, Wuornos is unique. Only 10% of violent criminals are women. There are even fewer female serial killers. Like Tinning and Wood and Graham, who suffocated their victims, most women who kill use less violent methods than their male counterparts. What are the forces that drive the few violent female killers? Women like Eileen Wuornos. Dr. Catherine Lewis, forensic psychiatrist at the University of Connecticut, studies violent women.
Society has at times labeled violence among women as stemming from craziness, mental illness, bad judgment, and stress.
Dr. Lewis tested these assumptions by conducting the largest ever study of incarcerated women. She interviewed 136 felons to identify their violent patterns.
We examined women with significant violence histories. Our population was women who had been sentenced and were serving at least 2 years.
She administered an interview that identifies a broad range of psychiatric disorders.
The structured interview assesses symptoms of depression, symptoms of psychosis, symptoms of substance dependence.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lewis.
Hi. And symptoms of other disorders like antisocial personality disorder.
Did people complain that you were often a bully, deliberately hurting, threatening, or being mean to other children?
Yes.
Okay. How old were you?
Dr. Lewis found one common disorder in many of her subjects.
The amount of physical violence by women with antisocial personality disorder was striking.
I robbed him and I killed him as cold as ice. And I'd do it again too. I know I'd kill another person because I've hated humans for a long time.
Antisocial personality disorder is characterized by a disregard for the feelings of others and is a trait seen in Eileen Wuornos.
At what age did you first start?
In Dr. Lewis's population, these symptoms were evident at a very early age.
Did you ever hurt or injure a pet or any other animal on purpose?
When I was 8 or 9, I used to shoot squirrels.
Did you shoot them for food, or why did you do that?
It was fun.
Okay. For the average woman with a significant violence history, the onset of symptoms was about 8 years of age.
How old were you the first time you stole or shoplifted?
The first time I think was 11.
These women had significant problems with their behavior even in childhood, which only worsened when they began to use substances.
Like Dr. Lewis's subjects, Wuornos' troubles surface at an early age. She grows up in a physically and emotionally abusive household and claims she was raped at the age of 12. She starts drinking and abusing drugs in her early teens, picks fights with classmates, and trades sex for cigarettes and pocket change. As an adult, Warnos's criminal behavior escalates. She drinks heavily, robs a convenience store with a pistol, and is arrested for starting a bar fight. Dr. Lewis found that the combination of substance abuse and antisocial personality disorder creates a volatile mixture.
Women who had antisocial personality disorder and heavy substance dependence gave answers to questions that were striking. Has that gone on when you're clean or when you're using alcohol or drugs, or both?
Mostly when I was high, but both.
Some of them described participating in armed robberies, killing people, cutting people's face with a knife. They were describing things that were quite aggressive.
1989. Warnos's aggressive tendencies lead to murder. Working as a prostitute, she solicits a man driving along a Florida highway. She shoots him 4 times, killing him. She dumps the body, steals his car, and pawns his belongings. Warnos develops a pattern. She solicits truck drivers, then shoots them. She kills at least 5 more men. Dr. Lewis believes that exceptionally violent women like Eileen Warnos resemble another subpopulation: men.
What we learn from this study about female patterns of violence is that when we look at extremely violent women, the patterns aren't that different from extremely violent men.
Warnos is arrested in 1991. She is convicted of 6 counts of murder and is executed in 2002.
Motivated by revenge against men, Warnos's ruthless predatory crimes place her at level 17. The same place on the scale occupied by notorious male killers such as Ted Bundy, who killed at least 30 women, and Arthur Shawcross, who murdered 11 people.
On Dr. Stone's scale of evil, level 17 is reserved for killers who are manipulative and impulsive, characteristics generally attributed to males.
Gender-based behavior begins to break down at the top of the scale. The few violent female killers at these levels exhibit characteristics the general population considers to be distinctly male.
And the most vicious of these killers is Teresa Knorr. Eileen Warnos was the first woman to fit the FBI's profile of a serial killer. She killed more than 3 people over an extended period of time. But Warnos is not history's first multiple murderess. She is part of a long, grisly tradition of murderous females. Erzsébet Báthory, a 17th century Hungarian countess, was a cruel and sadistic master. After brutally beating a servant, Báthory believed that the girl's blood made her skin appear younger. According to legend, she bathed in the blood of her young victims to restore her beauty. She is believed to have tortured and killed more than 600 people. More than 300 years later in Indiana, Belle Gunness began her killing spree. Gunness murdered for financial benefit. Placing ads in newspapers, she lured men with the promise of marriage, then murdered her suitors and collected their money. She dismembered their bodies and buried the parts on her farm. Gunness is believed to have killed over 40 men and was dubbed Hell's Belle by the media. 20 years after the crimes of Belle Gunness, Nanny Doss, known as the Giggling Granny, began her life of crime. She poisoned 4 husbands. She killed one because he cheated on her, and another because he wouldn't let her watch her favorite TV shows. Her preferred method? Lacing prunes with arsenic. Nanny's blood relatives allegedly faced her wrath. She is suspected of killing her own mother and 2 of her daughters.
Many of these people here are from the press, and they want to know whether or not you feel all right.
Yes, sir. I feel very good. Y'all have all been very nice to me. I've had good meals, nice warm bed to sleep in. Been treated very nice by each and every one of them on the floor.
After her arrest in 1954, Nanny Doss giggled while relaying her crimes to the police. Stories of evil women have persisted throughout the ages. Dr. Stone has created a scale with 22 levels to compare the motives and methods of the evil women who confront us today. Women like Mary Beth Tinning, who killed some of her children in a desperate bid for attention. Wood and Graham made a game of murder, suffocating elderly patients to solidify their bond. The highest levels of Dr. Stone's scale are reserved for sadistic murderers. Killers who inflict prolonged torture on their victims. There are few women in these ranks.
In general, women are rarely sadistic. It is even more uncommon to see a woman take sadistic tendencies to the diabolical extreme of someone like Theresa Knorr.
1983, Sacramento, California. Theresa Knorr is a single mother of 3 sons and 3 daughters. But there is another side of Theresa Knorr that hides behind the facade of a deeply religious mother. She is jealous of her thin, adolescent daughter, so she force feeds her. Knorr makes huge quantities of macaroni and cheese, scalds the girl's bare legs with a pot, and forces her to finish it in one sitting. This is how Theresa Knorr punishes her daughters before she kills them. What are the factors that contribute to the vindictive behavior of Theresa Knorr? To answer this question, Dr. Stone examines her past. Sacramento. Young Theresa Knorr vies with her sister for the attention of her mother. At age 15, Theresa's mother collapses from a heart attack and dies in her arms.
The death of her mother is a turning point for Knorr. It sends her into a deep depression and shapes her later relationships.
1962. Theresa Knorr marries and has a child at the age of 16. She is very controlling of her husband. She suspects he is cheating on her. In a heated argument, he threatens to leave her. Theresa shoots him with a hunting rifle, killing him. Knorr claims she acted in self-defense and is acquitted. This is just the first in a string of deadly acts. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Stone is investigating the case of sadistic torture murderer Theresa Knorr. Knorr's crimes place her on the highest level of Stone's scale of evil. Knorr shot and killed her first husband and was acquitted of the crime. She goes on to marry 3 more times and gives birth to 5 more children.
Knorr was pathologically controlling of her husbands. However, it was her children who were the focus of her rage.
Knorr drinks heavily and develops diabolical punishments for her children. She forces them to weed the yard with teaspoons, locks them in the freezer, throws knives at them, and burns them with cigarettes. Knorr is particularly malicious towards her daughters. She wears leather gloves to beat them and forces her sons to join in the punishment. 1983, the abuse escalates. Knorr is convinced her daughter Susan is possessed by the devil and is cursing her to gain weight. Theresa shoots Susan in the chest. Susan survives. The bullet remains lodged in her body. A year later, Teresa performs surgery on Susan. Her brothers hold her down on the kitchen floor while Teresa removes the bullet with a scalpel and pincers. She leaves her suffering daughter lying on the floor. The wound becomes infected. Susan becomes delusional. Teresa and 3 of her children drive Susan to a field and set her on fire, burning her to death. Her body is discovered.
I'm putting out the flames and I'm seeing all this stuff, and then I see the toes sticking out.
But police cannot identify the charred remains. Teresa's brutality escalates. She forces her daughter Sheila into prostitution. Teresa believes Sheila infects her with a venereal disease. She ties Sheila up and locks her in a closet for days and starves her to death. She orders her sons to put the body in a box and dump it in a field. Sheila's body is discovered and is listed by police as Jane Doe. 9 years after Sheila's death, Teresa Knorr's youngest daughter turns her in.
Believe me, I've asked myself 100 times, why didn't I just take my sisters and run? And I can't answer that because now I know I would have. But then it was so hard. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know what to do.
Unlike Tinning, Wood, and Graham, Teresa Knorr inflicted prolonged torture on her victims. Dr. Stone believes this sets her apart.
Knorr exhibited brutality not commonly seen in women. She tortured all of her children and viciously murdered 2 of her daughters, and displayed a callous disregard for their suffering.
Dr. Stone ranks Teresa Knorr at the highest level of his scale, level 22. Women who kill. What motivates their murderous deeds? Research reveals fundamental differences between these women and their male counterparts. However, there are striking similarities.
While their crimes are not common, the top levels of my scale reveal that women are capable of brutal crimes that have devastating impact.
Why on earth would any mother raise a child to 17 years of age and then kill it? What kind of mother would do that? And what kind of person am I going to be throughout the rest of my life because of this?
Dr. Stone continues to compare the horrific crimes of women who kill, in the hopes of one day helping us not only to understand, but guard against their crimes.